Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH2503 Community Media Production, and this is the 11th lecture summary where I'll describe briefly what's going to be involved in this week's lecture that will take place on Thursday. It's the last one we have before Christmas, so it's been a long process. We've gone through quite a number of subjects and issues, but we're really kind of making good progress. I've done a PowerPoint presentation as usual and lots of diagrams, images and video clips in here, so I won't share the PowerPoint presentation, but I have posted the notes, the background notes for the lecture to the DMU Commons wiki. So as ever, if you go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk and just search for the TECH2503 page, and we're looking at the notes for week 11. The main topics that we're going to cover in this session is the idea of kind of social movements and sustainability policies and ideas of sustainability. So the key issue to think about with this is we're approaching this from what's called a pragmatic perspective, which basically I'll try and sum up in a kind of as simple way as I can, but it's actually quite a simple premise really, is that there's kind of no outside point, no kind of universal fulcrum or kind of what's called a metaphysical position external to our experience that we can make judgments and decisions on. Really what we have to do is we have to arrive at consensus, and through deliberation, debate and conversation, we have to arrive at a consensus about our options and what we mean by things. So we take a very kind of grounded, practical, empirical view of society and social relationships. And we're not waiting for either the marketplace or for history or some other kind of external force to be brought about, ideological force, whatever it is, to be brought about on our actions. We have to focus on who we are here and now and have the debates and the discussions to bring about change and ensure that our social relationships are sustainable for the future. So what we'll look at this in the context of, so think about the issue of the Great Disruption, which we covered a few weeks ago, but also to think about the way that kind of corporatization and marketization of the economy sets about certain challenges to environmental regulation. So, the idea of kind of, on the one hand, growth is the main factor that accounts for economic accumulation, and yet environmental degradation is often seen as a kind of a backstop issue, something that kind of is forced upon the markets, forced upon politicians to regulate social lack of social sustainability. Let's put it that way. So what we're going to look at this in the context of then is the idea that kind of there are social movements, different types of social movements that are coming forward or have come forward that present different views about these, how we can impact change, how we can argue for change, and the way that social change is a kind of contested space. It's something which is really up for grabs. And on the one hand, it's something which we can look for kind of improvements in the democratic process, but on the other hand, we kind of look for changes to the structure of what we mean by sustainability. So in terms of things like social justice, in terms of things like democratic solutions, in terms of things like responding to environmental crises. All of these are part and parcel of the discussion and the civic engagement of different forms of protest against the dominant ways that things are done. And the suggestion is that alternative pathways are possible in civil society, that we can develop different ways of doing things. We don't all have to do things the same way. There are different ways that we can structure society, different ways that we can respond to changes in the economy, different ways that we can be activists or we can be advocates for social change. And the two imply a very different kind of approach, but the general tenor is that an activist or an advocate is somebody who wants to see us doing things in a different way. So we'll think about the way that activist groups or advocate groups can leverage change, can bring about change through their actions. And primarily we want to focus this on an idea about the local, what it means to be local. And we've mentioned the idea of distributionism previously. I want to go into that in a little bit more detail. But also it's associated with things like professionalisation or deprofessionalisation, which is something that's really at the heart of community agendas for community media. A kind of the market produces a set of standardised products, professionalised products, globalised products, whereas the kind of communities are based around localised products and deprofessionalised products and de-standardised products. So we open things up for innovation, for change and variation and local responses to local issues. And this is a real kind of contentious way of thinking when you actually try and put policies in practice. So at the moment we've got a kind of corporate dominance. We've got a kind of a model of economic development which is suited to large corporations who executively manage their businesses through subsidiaries and financialisation. But social change, lasting and meaningful social change, is going to come from somewhere else. And it's what we're going to look at the idea of what Richard Rorty talks about in kind of the idea of either hope or fear. The idea that we can look forward to doing things differently tomorrow in the way that we organise our society, or alternatively we can be held back by always, if you like, accounting for the past sins of a society. So there's a kind of broad political debate which challenges ideas of consensus and change. On the wiki, there's a link to some reading, and so I've used the chapter 13 in the Stephen Moore book for this, which is the David Hess chapter, Social Movement, Civil Society and Sustainability. I'm also attached a link to a chapter or a pamphlet that's been circulating around on social media from Richard Rorty called Achieving Our Country, Leftist Thought in 20th Century America, which is worth reading as a kind of postscript to the Trump election. And then I've posted a link via the Boxer Broadcasts to a programme called Bob and Roberta's Excellent Protest Adventure, which is about an artist called Bob and Roberta. It's only one guy who travels around to meet different types of protesters. And it's really interesting. He looks at kind of different levels of protest, different types of protest engagement. So that's the last lecture written for, I'm sure I'll spot some mistakes during the week. But I'm hoping to see you on Thursday and we can go through it with some questions and engagement. So I'll speak to you then.